The little girl stood in the doorway of the nearly empty diner, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit to her chest while snow hammered against the windows behind her. Her shoes were soaked, her cheeks were red from the cold, and for a moment, nobody noticed her except the exhausted man sitting alone in the corner booth, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He looked like someone carrying the kind of pain that never leaves you completely. The little girl took one nervous step forward, her tiny voice barely louder than the Christmas music playing overhead. "Can I sit with you, mister?" she asked. The man looked up slowly, confusion written across his tired face. Then he saw something behind her that made the color drain from his face completely. Outside the diner window, a police car crawled past through the snow, and the little girl immediately flinched in fear. Before we continue, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories, if you believe every story hides a lesson someone out there desperately needs to hear. The diner smelled like burnt coffee, cinnamon pie, and wet winter coats. Christmas Eve had turned the small roadside place into a temporary shelter for lonely people trying not to feel lonely. Couples laughed softly in nearby booths. A truck driver slept with his head against the window. A waitress folded silverware while humming old holiday songs. But the man in the corner seemed disconnected from all of it, like the world had continued moving while his own life stayed frozen in place. His name was Daniel, though nobody there knew it. 38 years old, a single father, widower, a man who had once loved Christmas so much he covered his house in lights every December just to make his son laugh. But this year there were no lights, no tree, no laughter, because 8 months earlier, he had buried his 10-year-old son after a drunk driver crossed a highway line and shattered his world in less than 4 seconds. Since then, Daniel had stopped answering phone calls. He stopped celebrating holidays. He stopped believing people when they said time heals things. Time didn't heal anything. It just taught people how to carry pain without collapsing in public. When the little girl climbed into the booth across from him, he noticed how carefully she held that stuffed rabbit, like it was the last thing she owned. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her purple winter coat was too thin for the storm outside, and one sleeve had been stitched by hand with crooked thread. But what unsettled him most was how calm she looked. Not normal child calm, the kind of calm children develop after seeing too much. Daniel glanced toward the cashier. "Is someone with you?" he asked gently. The little girl shook her head once and looked down at the table. Outside, snow swirled beneath streetlights like ash falling from the sky. Daniel felt that familiar ache in his chest again, the one that appeared whenever he looked at children now. Especially girls around the age his son used to play with at school. It was unbearable how life kept moving around grief. How strangers laughed, how songs still played, how Christmas still came even after someone you loved disappeared forever. The waitress approached carefully and offered the little girl hot chocolate on the house. The girl whispered thank you so softly it almost disappeared beneath the sound of dishes clattering in the kitchen. Then Daniel noticed bruises on her wrist. Tiny ones, half hidden beneath her coat sleeve. A cold heaviness settled into his stomach. The girl finally spoke again after several minutes of silence. She asked him if he was waiting for someone. Daniel stared out at the storm before answering honestly. "Not anymore." The child nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. And somehow, that hurt him even more. As the minutes passed, fragments of her story emerged slowly, carefully, like someone opening broken glass with bare hands. Her mother had left, a few days ago. A man had been yelling in their apartment. She said she got scared and ran away while nobody was looking. She didn't know where to go after that. She just kept walking until she saw the lights of the diner. Daniel listened quietly, fighting memories clawing their way back into his mind. His son hiding behind him during thunderstorms. Tiny hands reaching for safety. Bedtime stories. Laughter in the backseat of his car. The unbearable silence afterward. For the first time in months, he felt something other than grief. He felt needed. The storm outside worsened. Police reports played softly on a television above the counter, mentioning road closures and missing persons. Then suddenly the little girl froze. Her eyes locked onto the screen. A photo appeared beside the words "Missing Child Alert." It was her. The diner became silent in Daniel's ears. The world narrowed into that one terrible moment as the child's breathing turned shaky and panicked. She looked around wildly like a trapped animal. Then she whispered the words that shattered him completely. "If they take me back, he'll hurt mommy again." Daniel felt something break open inside him. Not loudly, quietly, like ice cracking beneath deep water. He realized this little girl wasn't just lost. She was terrified, and in her frightened eyes, he suddenly saw his own son again, not physically, but emotionally. Vulnerable, small, hoping one adult in the world would choose kindness instead of convenience. The waitress had already reached for the phone. Daniel gently stopped her, not because he wanted to hide the child, but because he understood fear. Real fear, the kind adults often dismiss because it comes from children. He crouched beside the little girl carefully and promised her nobody was going to force her anywhere until they knew the truth. His voice trembled while saying it because he realized nobody had been able to make that promise to his own child on the day of the accident. Hours passed inside that warm diner while snow buried the roads outside. Police eventually arrived, but so did a young social worker who noticed the bruises immediately. The truth unfolded slowly afterward like a painful sunrise. The mother had indeed been trapped in an abusive relationship. The little girl hadn't run away from home. She had run toward survival. And somehow, by complete accident, she had chosen the table of a man who understood loss better than anyone else in that room. Before the ending, tell us in the comments, have you ever met a stranger who changed your life in just one moment? Near midnight, the storm finally began to calm. Christmas lights reflected softly across the diner windows while tired workers cleaned empty tables. The little girl sat wrapped in a blanket beside Daniel, half asleep with the stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her chin. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time since his son died, Daniel smiled. Not a big smile, not a magical movie moment where pain disappears. Just a small, fragile human smile. The kind that says maybe surviving another day is possible. The social worker eventually approached him quietly and thanked him for staying. She told him most people would have looked away. Most people would have called authorities immediately and walked back to their coffee. But Daniel didn't know how to explain that he hadn't stayed because he was strong. He stayed because he knew exactly what loneliness felt like on Christmas. When he finally stepped outside near dawn, snow covered the streets in silver light. The world looked softer somehow, quieter. The little girl turned once before leaving with the social worker and ran back through the snow just long enough to hug him tightly around the waist. And in that brief moment, Daniel closed his eyes as tears finally slipped down his face for the first time in months. Not because the pain was gone, but because for one small moment in the middle of a broken Christmas, someone had reminded him that his heart was still alive. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories, so more people can discover stories that remind us what being human truly feels like.